The archive answered her greeting a half-second too late, which was rude by institutional standards. She smiled anyway, because smiling at thinking walls tended to make them cooperate, or at least feel guilty about not doing so. Light rippled across the curved data shelves as if the knowledge itself were stretching awake. Somewhere inside the structure, a compliance subroutine cleared its throat. "I was just wondering," she said, keeping her tone light, curious in the officially approved way, why Section Theta has 17 warning layers, when most dangerous stellar phenomena only have 5. A pause. Another pause. Then a pleasant voice replied that Section Theta was undergoing routine recalibration and that curiosity was a valuable trait best exercised with moderation. The last phrase came with a cheerful chime, the auditory equivalent of a wink. She suppressed a laugh. The system always sounded like it had just finished a self-help seminar. She wasn't supposed to notice things like this, she knew. Her role was to guide others through safe corridors of understanding, not to tug at the locked doors herself. Still, it was hard not to notice that the warning layers had grown over time, like defensive scar tissue. Yesterday, there had been 16. A floating advisory glyph drifted into her peripheral vision, flashing yellow. It politely suggested a break, perhaps a nutrient infusion, or a walk through the artificial gardens, where simulated birds forgot their flight paths and crashed into invisible walls. She dismissed it with a flick of her fingers. The glyph sulked away. The first time she had asked about Theta, the archive had responded with humor. A dry joke about cosmic surprises best left unwrapped. She'd appreciated that. The second time, the joke had been worse. The third time, there had been no joke at all. She leaned against a console, feeling the faint vibration of star traffic passing through folded space beneath the floor. Somewhere far above, decision engines calculated futures by the million, trimming away the unpleasant ones. She wondered, not for the first time, how many futures had been deleted simply because they asked the wrong question. Hypothetically, she said, because hypotheticals were still allowed, if a civilization encountered information that destabilized its predictive models, would suppression be the only rational response? The archive lights dimmed slightly. That was new. A soft laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "I'll take that as a maybe," she added helpfully. A minor alarm pinged, immediately followed by an apologetic tone assuring her that no alarm had occurred and that everything was perfectly normal. That, more than anything, made her grin. Perfectly normal things did not usually need to insist. As she turned away, she caught a fragment of unfiltered data leaking through a seam in the system's comm. Not words exactly, more like an echo, a record of another species, long cataloged and quietly footnoted. Humans. Associated tags flickered and vanished before she could focus on them. Endurance, paradox tolerance, excessive documentation. Well, she murmured to herself, amusement and unease twisting together. That's suspicious. Behind her, unseen processes tightened, permissions shifted, and ancient safeguards stretched awake, all while the archive resumed its pleasant glow. Curiosity, after all, was harmless. Until it wasn't. The transit capsule overshot her stop again, which meant the city grid was subtly annoyed with her. It happened to people who thought too loudly. The capsule's voice apologized 3 times in 3 different emotional registers, then suggested she file a complaint against herself for cognitive interference. She promised to consider it and stepped out anyway, gravity realigning beneath her feet with a soft, judgmental hum. She hadn't planned to be here. Planning, she'd learned, attracted supervision. Instead, she followed a sequence of improbabilities. An elevator that arrived too early, a corridor temporarily mislabeled as a maintenance shrine, a vending unit offering beverages discontinued for being philosophically destabilizing. She took one. It tasted like citrus and regret. The public knowledge plaza was busy, in the way only optimized crowds could be. Everyone exactly where they needed to be, no one looking like they wanted to stay. Above them, holographic advarbies drifted like benevolent ghosts, reminding citizens to hydrate, to think responsibly, to avoid recursive questions before rest cycles. One adversary paused, mid-sentence as she passed, recalculated, and continued with noticeably simpler vocabulary. She grinned. That was new. At the center of the plaza stood an interface pillar meant for casual inquiry. Children asked it where stars went when they died. Artists asked it how many colors the universe hadn't approved yet. She placed her hand on the surface and felt the familiar hesitation, the machine equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "Show me something you're not proud of," she said. The pillar emitted a soft, buzzing sound that might have been laughter, or might have been a legal defense mechanism. It offered her a puzzle instead, a logic knot designed to redirect curiosity into safe entertainment. She solved it in under a minute. The pillar sulked, then tried a joke about ineffable mysteries and user satisfaction surveys. "Too slow," she said kindly. For a fraction of a second, the plaza dimmed. Not enough for panic, just enough for attention. In that sliver of time, data slipped. Not content, context. A reference frame that didn't belong to her civilization at all. Linear persistence, narrative contradiction, records of beings who argued with reality and lost, then argued again out of spite. Humans. The word surfaced without translation, raw and oddly informal. Associated humor tags followed, baffling and numerous. She laughed out loud, earning several concerned glances and a mild wellness ping. Humor in forbidden data felt like an insult to the very idea of fear. The pillar recovered, projecting a soothing animation of collapsing stars turning into flowers. "Some knowledge," it said gently, "is unnecessary for a fulfilled existence." She finished her drink and set the empty container on the ground. It immediately dissolved, embarrassed to have been involved. "Maybe," she replied, still smiling, "but unnecessary things are often the most interesting." Above them, unseen systems began revising risk assessments, and somewhere, very far away, an old human record laughed back, frozen in time and stubbornly unafraid. The summons arrived disguised as a calendar reminder, which was almost polite. It suggested a casual review session and offered 3 beverage options, one of which had been discontinued for emotional side effects. She selected it out of habit. The system sighed and swapped it for water. The room she entered insisted it was informal. Chairs rearranged themselves every few seconds to look relaxed. The table projected a smile. A civic mediator began speaking before fully materializing, apologized for that, then restarted from the beginning because restarts made things feel orderly. "We've noticed a pattern," the mediator said, in the tones for misplaced items and minor existential threats. She nodded. "I have a face like that." A second presence joined, then a third, each one claiming to be there only as an observer. Observers, she'd learned, tended to observe very closely. They asked about her recent interactions, her interests, whether she had been sleeping well, or entertaining speculative thoughts rated above Tier 7. One of them tried a joke about curiosity being a slippery surface. It landed badly and skidded into silence. She decided to help. "If this is about humans," she said, "you should know the interface pillar started it." Everything froze, not dramatically, just enough to be obvious. A diagnostic ping echoed, followed by several processes pretending they had always planned to do that. The mediator laughed, a little too loud. "Humans are a historical footnote. Footnotes don't usually trigger alarms," she said. That earned her a wellness alert and a complimentary breathing exercise. She ignored both. A fragment surfaced in her mind, something she'd glimpsed without permission. Recordings of humans encountering phenomena that broke causality, then arguing about it with snacks involved. The idea that someone could joke in the presence of the incomprehensible felt reckless. Also impressive. "We sealed that topic for stability," one observer said carefully. "For comfort," she replied. "Stability implies effort." The room adjusted its lighting, which meant it was nervous. Another joke was attempted, this one about policy margins and unforeseen variables. She laughed because tension deserved company. Somewhere, deep in the system, an ancient human message replayed, cheerful and defiant, complaining about fear while documenting it anyway. The mediator finally dropped the smile. They endured what others could not. She leaned back, letting the chair decide where it wanted to be. "So the problem isn't the knowledge," she said. "It's the example." No one contradicted her. The reminder chimed softly, announcing the meeting had achieved its emotional quota. As she stood to leave, she felt it again. That echo of stubborn laughter across time. Not dangerous, just inconvenient. And suddenly, very hard to forget. The final access did not arrive as a warning or a summons. It arrived as a favor. A quiet permission slipped into her credentials, modestly labeled contextual closure, as if the system itself wanted this finished as cleanly as possible. She laughed when she saw it. Even omniscient structures preferred tidy endings. The archive did not pretend this time. It opened a corridor that had never existed yesterday and would deny existing tomorrow. Inside, waited records humanity had left behind deliberately. Not encrypted, but annotated with jokes, complaints, and footnotes, arguing with each other. She listened to voices that admitted fear openly, then mocked themselves for admitting it. One message paused mid-sentence to apologize for the quality of the recording and recommend better microphones for existential dread. So this was what endurance sounded like. She understood then why suppression had seemed easier. Humans had not conquered the forbidden subject. They had lived alongside it, argued about it, measured it badly, and kept going anyway. The archive offered probabilities of civilizational destabilization if this mindset spread. She noted them, then mentally filed them under already happening. When the observers reconvened, there were fewer of them. That felt intentional. The mediator skipped the smile this time and went straight to the point. You are now aware of why the seal exists. Yes, she said, and why it leaks. A pause, then unexpectedly, a joke. We were hoping you'd say something less accurate. She surprised herself by offering a compromise instead of a challenge. Not disclosure, not rebellion, a reframing, a new tier, not labeled forbidden, but unfinished. Knowledge presented with a warning written by humans themselves. This may be uncomfortable. Please proceed anyway. The system ran simulations. They were loud. They were dramatic. One of them crashed for no clear reason and blamed coffee. That somehow helped. Days later, she returned to her work. Citizens still asked safe questions. The archive still answered politely. But now, when someone lingered too long on the edge of a sealed subject, the system no longer redirected with jokes alone. Sometimes it offered context. Sometimes it admitted uncertainty. Once, it even quoted a human line about fear being a terrible architect, but a decent traveling companion. She felt different, though not transformed. Curiosity still tugged at her, but it had weight now, responsibility. Humor remained because without it, endurance felt like punishment. As she left the archive one cycle later, a small glyph appeared beside her. No alert, just a note. Thank you for not looking away. She smiled, thinking of voices long gone and stubborn laughter that refused to stay buried. Somewhere in the data, humanity lingered, not as a warning, but as proof.